All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bookshop Romance Day. We're so happy to have everyone here. There were a little bit of technical difficulties at the beginning, and we can only have 6 of us on the screen at one time. And so we're going to have Sonali joining us in a little bit. We'll do some like switcherooing. But yeah, so we're still really excited. And I think everything is figured out and we're ready to go. So first of all, thank you so much, Carter, for organizing this. Thank you, Astoria Bookshop, for having all of us, and especially giving me the chance to moderate an event with some of my absolute favorite romance writers and the amazing fellow 2021 debuts. So I'm super excited to be here, and I will try very hard, to be cool and not fangirl. But I make no promises. And so I think Carter was going to introduce everyone here at the start, but if we don't mind going around here at the beginning, doing brief introductions, and then talking a little bit about your most current romance, I think that would be fantastic. To kind of get started, I'm Alison Cochrun. I am the moderator for this event. My debut novel, The Charm Offensive, comes out in September 7th. And yeah, why don't we go to Alexandria?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandria Bellefleur, and my most recent release is Hang the Moon. I tend to write opposites attract romances between sunshine characters and the grumps who are weak for them. So in Hang the Moon, we follow Brendan, a hopeless romantic dating app creator who vows to show his childhood crush, Annie, that romance isn't dead by recreating iconic dates from his favorite films to varying degrees of success.
Awesome. Fantastic. And it's wonderful. So excited for your next book. All right, Sonia, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Sonia Hartl, and my debut adult rom-com, Heartbreak for Hire, just came out on July 27th. I'm also a YA writer, and I have 2 YA books out already, and I have another one coming out in 3 weeks. So I am very much in promo land right now between 2 books, and yeah, I'm very excited to be here with everybody.
Amazing. And The Lost Girls is your YA book coming out September 14th, right?
Yes. Yep.
Very excited for that one. It sounds amazing. Fantastic. All right, Preslaysa. Oh, you are muted.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I unmuted myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Preslaysa Williams. I write contemporary romance, obviously. My Avon debut released earlier this year on June 1st. It's a Lowcountry Bride, as you can see back there. It's a sweet, heartwarming romance that takes place in the South with an Afro-Filipina bridal gown designer and a widowed single dad who owns a struggling bridal shop in downtown Charleston.
Awesome. Thank you. I embarrassingly had never heard of the Lowcountry region before I heard about your book, but you do such an amazing job capturing the setting in your novel, and I just thought it was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
So, yeah, thank you. All right, Alyssa.
Making sure it's unmuted. I'm Alyssa Cole. I write various romance subgenres and thrillers, and just finished my first YA graphic novel, YA romance graphic novel. My latest release is How to Find a Princess, which is the 2nd book in the Runaway Royal series, and it is a queer contemporary romance inspired by Anastasia, which basically pairs a woman who absolutely wants nothing to do with her supposed long-lost royal heritage and the very determined investigator who is trying to bring her back to claim her heritage on a cargo ship.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Thien-Kim, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Thien-Kim Lam, and I'm a debut author with Avon, and my book is Happy Endings. It's back there. I'm a little envious of Preslaysa's giant poster. But Happy Endings is a second chance romance between a Vietnamese American sex toy sales consultant and a Black restaurateur set in DC. And they have to work together to help each other's businesses survive, and things get, exciting.
Yeah, very spicy for sure. Awesome. Thank you. I'm sure Carter also wanted me to mention that all of these books are available for purchase through Astoria Bookshop. You can click on the buy signed copies of the books. We are signed book plates for you. And so make sure you do that and support Astoria Books and the authors here today. All right. Well, since we're here to celebrate Bookstore Romance Day, I kind of thought we could start by talking a little bit about what first drew us to the romance genre. So either as a reader or as a writer, what kind of first attracted you to romance, or maybe what is one of your early memories of engaging with romance? And so Preslaysa, do you want to go ahead and start on this one?
My earliest memories of engaging with romance actually didn't happen until I became a new mom, which is about like 11 years ago. And I needed a break from momming. So I just got into reading romance at that time. At the time, I was really into the inspirational romance genre. I'm not so much into it as much today, but that was my introduction into the world of romance.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And then Sonia, how about you, since you also write in some different genres?
For me, I would say my first introduction to romance was Babysitter's Club #10, Logan Likes Marianne. That was the book for me when I was growing up. I read that thing so many times. The cover fell off, the binding came unglued, I had pages that were falling out of it. I was completely in love. That was the first time that I was really like, I love romance, and it was a great story.
That is fantastic. I love that. Alexandria, how about you?
So my first foray into romance was actually Twilight. I read it when it first came out, and yeah, the spine of the book fell apart. I read it so many times. I still have it, but it's decrepit. Basically, I can't read it anymore. I have like passages underlined, and it drew me in. And then I kind of segued into reading and writing fan fiction based on Twilight, and that opened up a whole new world for me into romance. But that was my first introduction to romance.
Yes, a very like quintessential millennial experience. I definitely relate to that one. And then Thien-Kim, how about you?
So I started really young. When I discovered I could borrow books from the library, I read everything I could get my hands on. And I lived in a small town. We had a bookmobile stop in front of in our neighborhood. And eventually we were the only ones, my sister and I, so they would just stop in front of our house every week. And I had run out of children's books to read on the bookmobile. And then there was this giant section of mass markets. And I picked up a Harlequin, read it. I'm like, hey, there's sex in this book. That's so cool. And because, I was at the age where I was really curious, and we never talked about any of those things in my family. And here I'm like, okay, well, just let me figure out what the heck this sex thing is, and feelings and things like that. And I just got hooked into the love story. Sonia, it's funny, I didn't think about Babysitter's Club as romance because I read those too, but I read them for Claudia for the Asian representation.
Yeah, I love that. And just like the different experiences we can have with books. I love the image of you as a kid, like pulling Harlequin romances off of a bookmobile. That's amazing. And then Alyssa, how about you?
I also got started pretty young, though. I was reading stuff that probably like Danielle Steele and things that were like adjacent, but also romance for young readers. Like one book that I really remember making an impression on me was the book 15 by Beverly Cleary. Beverly Cleary. I was confused her and Judy Blume. And it's like set in like 1949 San Francisco. And it, now if I were to read it, it has like some very unfortunate stereotyping that I wouldn't recommend people read it. But for me, it was like, oh, I really love this. And, just things that I would find in the library, like those happy golden years, which is the only book I have read from the Little House on the Prairie series. I don't really know what else happens except from, watching the show when I was a kid, but it's like with Almanzo, like riding through snowstorms on a horse. And again, another series that probably I wouldn't recommend people read. But, just taking stuff from my parents' library and also fairy tales, just fairy tales and happily ever after and fairy tale retellings when I could find, when my parents had them. So just, I also read a lot of horror. So I just like things, but that had happy endings. Horror still has happy endings as well. So I just basically liked anything with happy endings.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into my next question, right? Since happily ever after is sort of the requirement of romance as a genre. And so in order for it to be a romance, you have to have this happily ever after. And I'm wondering, what does happily ever after mean to you as a romance writer? Is it just about having the characters get together in the end? Or is there more to it than that? And maybe Alyssa, we can start with you.
To me, it means that the characters, are both together, preferably alive. Although I guess if they're both ghosts and together, that could count. Debatable, but basically together, but also in a relationship that is beneficial to both of them, that enriches both of their lives and makes both of their lives better, so that even if the rest of the world, the things going in their lives still suck, they have like a kind of home base and something to, make their lives better and help push them forward. And no matter what else is going at the end of the book, because I think a lot of people outside romance think that everyone has to have money and be rich and have all their dreams come true. And that's not actually true. It's more about find them, for the romantic part, finding people who will support each other, a couple who will support each other, and then they can take on all the like unhappy things that happen in life.
Yeah, I love that. And that juxtaposition between the hardships and that happily ever after. Thien-Kim, how about you?
Mine is very similar to Alyssa's. When I read a romance and I close the book, I want to know that this imaginary couple is going to work hard to maintain their relationship and like actually communicate now, or if they don't, they figure things out together, but they're gonna be together. So it's that hope of their off-page future, that they're always gonna make sure that things work because they love each other enough to work for it.
Oh yeah, I love that. Hope. Alexandria, how about you?
Yeah, I would definitely echo both of those answers. For me, I feel like the most important part of a happily ever after is that the couple is on, or, the relationship between the main characters is on the same page, that they are willing to work together, they're communicating, and that they're tackling whatever other issues were encountered during the course of the book together and working as a support system. I don't need all of the other issues to be tied up in a neat little bow necessarily. Just for instance, in Written in the Stars, a lot of the family issues in the book aren't necessarily cleanly resolved because I don't find that to be necessarily realistic. But they are together and they help each other be the best that they can be when encountering or tackling those issues going forward. And that's a happy ending for me.
Yeah, I love that. And the realism of life is hard, right? And not everything has that perfect closure. And definitely a trend. A lot of you're talking about just like the tenets of a healthy relationship, right? That happily ever after means being in a relationship specifically that's healthy. Sonia, how about for you? I think I've lost Sonia on my screen at least. So maybe while we wait for her to come back, Preslaysa, do you mind sharing?
Sure. I guess for romance, I do envision the main characters having a happy and whole relationship at the end. But like many have said, I don't think that the issues and the themes covered in the story need to be wrapped up into a neat bow. What I'm looking for with the characters is that they come into their own in the way that they most need to come into their own for the story. So whether that's being more confident in expressing their unique voice, or like in the case of Maya, being more confident in expressing her unique design style and not trying to like fit into some mainstream expectation, then that to me, that's also happily ever after too. And I'm also looking for like the other love interest to help that character get to that point in the story.
Yeah, I love the way that you phrase that. So about coming into their own in the way that they need. Sonia, how about you?
For me, I agree with everybody else and echo everybody else's. For happily ever after, for me, is that when two characters who at the beginning of the story don't fit for whatever issues they have to overcome, you feel confident at the end of the story that they now fit, that they are now made for each other because of the issues that they've overcome throughout the course of the story. So whoever they were at the start is not who they are at the end, and who they were at the start didn't work, but who they were at the end does. And you're confident when you close the book that they're gonna be for the long haul.
Yeah, I love that. And I think with romance too, there's so many, and especially in your books, the characters are dealing with so many complex issues, internally as characters. And so I think this idea of ending their journeys, at least to a certain degree, is really nice. Okay, so let's maybe talk about STEAM a little bit. Since we're talking about the romance genre, it seems like increasingly STEAM is a way that readers are talking about romance. It's something that a lot of readers expect. It's a way that they like. It's now a rating, right? With like the fire emojis out of like 5, right? And so it seems increasingly like a thing that readers expect, but it's super subjective. And what is steamy to one reader might not be steamy to another, and readers have very different preferences about STEAM. And I think your novels really kind of represent the kind of gambit of no sex at all to, full steam ahead, open door, sex toys, right? Like there's a lot of kind of variety in how you approach this part of romance. And so I guess my question is, how, as a romance novelist, do you navigate those decisions about sex scenes and whether or not to include them, and what those look like? What goes into that for you as a writer? And Thien-Kim, maybe we can start with you and your book.
Well, my book is pretty spicy. And for me, I think I enjoy writing sex scenes. It's challenging for me because it's not just about the mechanics, right? There's all this emotion and what the character's going through. And I think that's what makes it so challenging and fun. But I think that, there's gotta be a reason for the sex scene. I think as a reader, I've read plenty of, I've read books where there's sex like every other chapter, which is exciting, but if it feels like the characters are just going through the motions, it doesn't move the story forward for me, right? So that's what I aim to do when I'm writing the sex scenes. And I actually had to cut one from Happy Endings. I was like, dang it, I really like this scene, but there's no reason for it to be here as part of the story of a whole. So you got to make those tough decisions.
Yeah. Alyssa, how about you?
Okay, so this is actually a pretty complex question, I think, because I feel like a lot of this, it depends on who you talk to. So, for example, if you're on Twitter and you see people talking about steamy stuff, they could be talking about it depends on the group of people who are talking to each other. Because for some people, okay, I'm sorry, it's just going over. But there are some people for who just reading sex on the page is steamy for them because of their background, how they were raised, the kind of their relationship with sex when they were growing up, and that reading that is a huge step for them. There are other people who find that boring and vanilla, and they think that reading, a book with like an alien with a spur on his penis is like the steamiest. And that is also, a reader preference. And by the way, I'm not like dissing Ice Planet Barbarians because I enjoy those books. But also then there are things that are way hotter than that. And the people who read that would find that tame. So I think there's like a whole spectrum, and it's really difficult to talk about the spectrum because it's really just individual reader taste, and it can't like, I think there are so many romance readers looking for different things that it's kind of impossible to really like determine what should be in a book, what shouldn't be a book. Usually I decide by the characters. There are some characters who, you know, they're by their personality and what they need in the book would be having sex right away. There are some characters who are a bit more fragile and need a bit to work up to that, to be able to trust each other enough to do that. So I think it all depends on the book. And like, it doesn't even have to be a matter of whether the characters are virgins. Like one of the most intensive, I think for me, books that I've written is with the character is a virgin who's just exploring stuff. And I think for other authors too. So I do think it's just like a spectrum, and it depends really on the individual characters in a story, and then also reader personal expectation from their own background.
Yeah, thank you. Preslaysa, how about you?
Well, when I write romance, I just write what I'm comfortable writing. So I'm comfortable just going as far as like kissing, holding hands, the long look in the eyes. And then I fill in what would be sex with like issues and like character development and emotional growth. So yeah, I just, the way I make decisions about the heat level of my book is just what I'm comfortable writing. So that's it.
Yeah, which seems like a really good philosophy to guide you through your writing, is to do what you feel comfortable with, as opposed to, yeah, because I mean, as Alyssa was saying, there are so many expectations, and we can't write to all readers, obviously. And I think writing what you feel comfortable with is really important. Sonia, how about you? How do you navigate those decisions?
For me, I actually, all of my books, including my YAs, have on-page sex in them. And that's just something that I prefer to write. Now, the lens, though, that I use when I write YA sex and the lens that I use when I write adult sex is extremely different. So if you're reading one of my YA books, it's not going to look anything like my adult books. And as far as my adult books go, writing sex in that, for me, it's because I enjoy it. It's fun. I think it's sexy. I love to see the characters interacting that way, and I love to see how their dynamics change in the bedroom versus, you know, when they're out in front of other people. I love that aspect of it. And so for me, it's basically, I do it because I love it. And that's not any more complicated than that. But yeah, but with when I'm writing YA, it's from a completely different spot and that's more or less when you're a teenager and exploring that it's new, there's a lot of emotions, it's more tied into figuring things out, and especially if you don't have a lot of experience, you know, kind of navigating that new side of coming into your own, and not saying that it's like a requirement, you know what I mean, but it's something that is important to me to display. So that's it.
Yeah, awesome. And Alexandria, how about you?
Yeah, I would just echo what everyone said around the subjectivity of steam levels. I feel like we're never going to reach a consensus on, you know, 3 flames versus 5 flames, because that is just very different for different people. And that's a good thing. For me, when I'm approaching intimacy in my books, I really focus on the intimacy versus the mechanics of it. All of my books are open door, but I approach each sex scene with, you know, where the characters are at in that scene and their relationship, and what's moving both plot and character forward. So the subjective steam level of Count Your Lucky Stars is going to be different than the subjective steam level of maybe Written in the Stars, because the characters are different and their relationship and their history is different. So yeah, I don't think that I approach any book the same as I do another book, but I definitely look to it with intimacy in mind versus sex in mind, because I have read so many books, not that I could name specifics on the spot, where they don't necessarily have on-page sex, but they are extremely hot, and maybe they're just touching hands. Maybe it's just a look. And that book builds that tension like none other. And so I don't think it can be understated that the focus on intimacy in that. So that's what I aim for.
Yeah, I love that. And
can I just add?
Yeah,
can I just jump on, because I'm gonna have to get out of here soon because Sonali has to come. But I just wanted to jump onto that. What Alexandria was saying about books that have no sex but are extremely steamy because of the intimacy, the banter, and the kind of emotion that is packed into the interaction with the characters. And like, so that's like a different thing than, you know, having sex. And also just that I do think that romance in general needs to be a bit more careful with the way they talk about this, because there are plenty of asexual spectrum romance readers who can feel pushed out or kind of mocked or, you know, made to feel not welcome if we start to act like every book has to have sex in it. So I think just being like sex positive includes like really enjoying erotic romance and steamy stuff, and also, you know, books that are closed door or don't have any sex scenes, because it's including all aspects of sexuality.
Yeah.
And
thank you so much.
I'm gonna go now because I'm so
sorry. We're gonna switch out Alyssa for Sonali.
So thanks everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. I will see if I can navigate that. Sorry, 1 second. All right, so Sonali will be joining us in just a second, and we will have her introduce herself. And thank you so much for being willing to kind of talk about that aspect of the romance genre. Hello, welcome.
Hi, I'm so sad that Alyssa had to go. That was such an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being willing to kind of navigate the technology with us. Do you want to just briefly talk to us, introduce yourself and talk to us about INCENSE and Sensibility?
Sure. And it was completely silent here in my backyard. I'm sitting in my sunroom, and then my neighbor in the back decided to mow his lawn. And
always, yeah.
So INCENSE and Sensibility is the fourth in my Jane Austen series, which is my 4 favorite Jane Austen novels under one story umbrella. And that story umbrella is a politically ambitious Indian American family in the Bay Area. And it's set during the gubernatorial campaign of their oldest son. So he's running for California governor. The books kick off with him announcing his candidacy, and then they will end at the end of the election. And INCENSE and Sensibility, to no one's surprise, is Sense and Sensibility. It's not the cleverest name. My son came up with it in middle school. And it's the story of the oldest son who is running for California governor. And it kicks off when there's an assassination attempt in the very first chapter, so no spoilers. And he loses his way and how he finds his way.
That sounds amazing. It is amazing. And I heard in an earlier panel today that your next book in the series is going to be an Emma retelling. Is that right?
Yes, and I think we have a title. It's not official yet, or maybe it is official because I just saw it on Amazon. I'm like, oh, it looks like it's official. So it's going to be called The Emma Project, which I'm in shock about, because I was like, how are we going to spin that name, because it's someone's name? But we were able to do it. And these are really loose. I mean, calling them retellings is a lie. They're just homages to those stories.
Yeah, I love that. But Emma is wonderful. And so I'm excited to see your homage to it.
And you guys were just talking about sex, and this entire, and I can jump in and answer that question because it ties in with Emma. And to me, I mean, everything everyone said made so much sense, but it is also always about the book, because, you know, a particular book calls for something different, as Alexandra was saying. And I think with this series, because it was Austen, and the Austen structure for a lot of her books is that they don't get together until the very end. So then the sex does not move anything along, and it doesn't do anything to the story. And therefore, you know, they don't have sex until the very end, by which time there's no reason for you to get into the nitty-gritties of it. But the Emma Project is going to be quite different, because Knightley and Emma have always known each other. And, you know, here they know each other biblically quite a bit. And so it's surprisingly suddenly, out of the blue, a very hot book in this series because they're bunnies and they did not want to stop doing it. And so there you have it.
I love that. Kind of the idea, one, of doing what we feel comfortable with and what we enjoy as writers, but then also this idea that every project demands something different, and different characters demand different kinds of stories. And I think listening to the kind of story that needs to be told is a wonderful way to think about it. So thank you for jumping in on that. Real quick too, if you have any questions for these phenomenal writers, there is a button or a little label on the bottom of your screen that says ask a question. In a couple minutes here, we will do some Q&A. So if you have any pressing questions, make sure you add them and I will read them out here in a minute. I love these books. And one of the things I really love about this particular assortment of books is that they are so, they kind of run the gambit of different kinds of characters, right? So we have this stressed politician. If Alyssa was still here, we have this secret princess, we have a dating app creator, we have a sex toy purveyor, we have a wedding dress designer, we have a professional heartbreaker. I think the creativity of the kinds of stories that you all told is just wonderful and amazing. And I think has some really interesting world building for romance. And so one of my questions is there some concept, some character, some idea that you have been ruminating on that you would love to write and you haven't written yet? And earlier today, I was watching Alexandria's Instagram stories and someone asked kind of a question and you said you've thought about writing paranormal romance, right? So maybe you can kind of start us off. What is the concept you would love to play around with that maybe you haven't yet?
Well, this isn't my paranormal idea, but I have been playing around with the idea of somebody who is outwardly supposed to be kind of a hopeless romantic, like a romance author who is secretly very jaded on the inside. So that's an idea that I've been toying around with. I like the idea of kind of public perceptions versus internal worlds. In terms of kind of the paranormal ideas I've been throwing around, kind of maybe a bedazzled retelling, but I can't get into the specifics of that.
Okay. All right. Well, I would absolutely read any of that, but I love the idea of a jaded romance novelist. That sounds amazing. Sonali, how about you?
Does someone else want to go before?
Oh, sorry.
Maybe he's done. No, he was really loud. Sorry. Yeah, it's really funny how I love darkness and I love humor. Those are the two things I think about the human condition that really attract me to stories. So I've always wanted to write. I've wanted everything I write to be dark feminist comedy. That's how I think about it. And I've come more into it. And I've also come more into this whole journey as women and age, and so I'm actually working on something that's, I'm not at liberty to talk about yet, but it's actually I see it as a dark feminist comedy. So there's always a lot of feminine rage in my books. And I think feminine rage works really well with thriller. Feminine rage works very well with humor. And, and that whole ridiculous humor, over the top, even sitcom-y, but with a really dark center. Because all humor really has a dark center because it's about how ridiculous we are as human beings, right? That's really what humor is about. And that's also what pathos and what makes us so do dark things, right, is about. So I think that mishmash and and crime, because I come from a world influenced so highly by Bollywood, that whole dark, crimey, people being awful but funny and kind, and so I am really, really excited about this thing I'm working on. It's killing me. I may not survive it, but it's and women in roles also that are completely outside the stereotype, because I feel like me as a person, when people meet me, that's I think a lot of us here have that, is they'll see you and they'll say romance novelist, and that means something, which is exactly what you were just saying, right? You're expected to be someone who believes in love in every form, and you are, but that's not your single truth. I mean, we're all cynical, right? And so I think that what you see isn't who you're seeing, and these layers, right, between you and the person you see. And I love playing with that. And you add age to that. An older woman is invisible, right? I mean, you hit middle age and a woman becomes completely invisible. And so just how do you deal with that, and your sexuality and your humor and your cynicism? So I think that it's easier said than done in terms of making it visible in the story, but that's what I want to do with my life.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you survive writing this feminine rage, like dark humor book, I cannot wait to read it. That sounds fantastic. Thien-Kim, how about you?
I would love to write fantasy romance one of these days. I'm a big fantasy reader before I got into romance, and just my brain can't wrap around like all the intricacies of plotting one. But I've always liked the idea of like going into a Vietnamese mythology and folklore to write something, like just a very origin story of origin myth of Vietnam is that a king fell in love with a beautiful fairy, and they had 100 children together. And because she's a fairy, right, she can have 100 children at one time. And they broke up and they split their kids. So one went to the north, like mountain-ish areas of Vietnam, and one took them down south, and that's how the country was formed. I'm like, wouldn't that make an amazing fantasy romance?
Yes, it would. That sounds fantastic. Right now I'm regretting asking this question because I just like want to read all of these books that don't exist yet. But yeah, that sounds amazing. And I would love more fantasy romance. Preslaysa, how about you?
I would probably, what I do a lot in my contemporary romances or my stories is that I kind of play around with history a lot. So I think my ideal, or not my ideal, but like a project that I'd want to try to do is kind of make that even more explicit by writing a dual timeline story that takes place in the past and the present, and then just making it like real, like clear, and like drawing those connections like not on the nose, but like just like being more clear about it. Like right now, like even in the Low Country Bride, I like allude to history. I talk about it, like they talk about it sometimes in dialogue, but I want to write a book where here's the past and here's the present and here's how they really connect. So yeah, that's what I want to do.
That sounds amazing. And Sonia, how about you?
For me, I'm really like for the past year and a half, I would say I'm just writing kind of like whatever like strikes me as something that would be fun to write, because I just need that. In the last year, it's been a rough year. So I've just been writing things that appeal to me and sound fun. And actually today, my agent tweeted about how her sister was visiting her on a flight and got stuck next to her ex on the airplane for 4 hours. And I was like, and everybody's like, rom-com. And I'm like, wait a minute. What if she sees her ex first, and then she goes to the flight attendant and says, can you switch me seats? But the flight is full. So the flight attendant comes up with this plan to get her in a flight attendant outfit so she can hang out with the flight attendants and act like she's working. And then a sweet little FF romance starts to bloom between them. And I was like, you know what? This seems like a really cool idea. And my agent was like, so you're going to write that, right? So that might be the next thing that I work on. So who knows?
FF romance on an airplane. I am so here for that. That sounds amazing. All of these projects sound so great, and you are all like so wonderfully creative. So my kind of final question before we switch to hearing some audience questions. traditionally published romance and mainstream romance has changed a lot in the last 5 years. And I am kind of wondering, how would you like to see it continue to change over the course of the next 5 years? So kind of what are your maybe hopes and dreams for Romancelandia? And I know that's kind of a big question. And so I don't know. Is anyone willing to start? Any thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Thien-Kim.
I just want more diverse romances, like more queer stories, more people of color. So it's not just one author representing a marginalized community and underrepresented community. Like the more we have, the more different stories we can tell. We can like really give nuance to those communities and what people are going through, and like change people's expectations of what it means to be Asian American, what it means to be queer, or neuroatypical, because there's not enough, and people who don't know about those communities have this expectation, and then when that book doesn't meet, like we can't put the weight of a whole community on one author's shoulders. So the more of those books that we that are published and the stories that go out there, the better it is for our society as a whole.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you, Thien-Kim. Anyone else want to add on? Yeah, go ahead, Sonali.
Yeah, very similar to what Thien-Kim just said, is that monolith, right? Right now, just not even all of South Asian, but just the Indian culture is over 1 billion people. And yet I was in Costco the other day and I was buying steak with my son to come home and have a nice dinner. And a man says, "I thought you people didn't eat that." And so there's a lot of that going on in publishing. And, we people, you people, all of us people are preconceived notions and monoliths. And I think that we've made a really great start given where we were 5 years ago. And it's no longer, two South Asian romance writers and, 3 Black romance writers and, 3 across the board, all Asian romance writers. We're not there, but we're still where the expectation of a South Asian book is X. The expectation of an Asian book is Y. The expectation of Black romance is Z. And unless we have volume, that's not going away. And, and so when you read a Alicia Rai book and a Sonali Dev book and a Farah Heron book, completely different stories, and yet very, very intrinsically South Asian, that's when that whole thing about you people don't do X, Y, Z has some chance of even shifting a little bit, right? I mean, in our lifetime, I don't know if it can ever go away completely, but we can sure hope. And I think so. So I just want to see volumes of that change happen.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have more thoughts to that. I think I would like to also see more diversity within the people that make the decisions in publishing, the editors, agents, the people in charge of saying yes that a book can get published, because a lot of books that come through on submission are will sometimes get rejected because it doesn't fit their ideal of what they think this story should be, and it's not because it's wrong, it's because they don't know any different. So I think more diversity within publishing would definitely be beneficial.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alexandria.
Yeah, I would just echo what everyone else said, because I feel like as a creator, you want to deliver on what readers want to see, but no queer creator is also able to deliver on what every queer reader wants to see. And so I feel like having a greater volume would remove some of the pressure. Some readers want to see a coming out narrative, for instance. Other readers are past that point in their life and they don't want to see that. And both, of those desires are very valid, but having that volume would provide for satisfaction all around. So I would just echo that volume is very, very important.
Yeah, and the burden of representation for an entire queer community, you know, the LGBTQIA plus community in one queer story can be really overwhelming. Yeah. Preslaysa, how about you?
I was thinking that when, like we were mentioning earlier about heat levels, and I write stories that have mostly like kisses and hand holding and longing looks. When we think about like those types of stories, the stories with like no heat or no sex on page, it's usually associated with like inspirational romance or like very vanilla type stories with like neat in a bow endings. And I would like to see like stories with a similar heat level, like with that low heat level, but they also show like the diversity of communities that, you know, a diversity of people that can exist in those worlds, the diversity of like issues that are explored in those worlds. So like, for example, you could have like a queer romance with like no sex on page. For example, you could do that. Or, you know, just I would like to see more diversity in that arena, in that heat level genre, because usually it's just associated with like the vanilla stories that don't really dive deep or show a diversity of people in those settings.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And as Alyssa was talking about, you know, when we talk about queer storytelling too, the ACE community is a big part of our romance reading community. And not all ACE readers are sex repulsed and don't want to see sex scenes in their books, but having that diversity of storytelling seems like it would be super beneficial for all readers. Yes, Sonali.
And there's a flip side to this, right? There's the whole other side to this where everyone's been screaming about you want diversity in worlds, but you don't want, you don't want white authors writing diverse characters. So once we, if there is, in a fair world, if there is a level playing field, then the whole field changes. Then we see diversity in all narratives, right? So then that's where we want to be. We want all stories to reflect our real world. And I'm guessing that there are people who live in bubbles, but I'm hoping that the stories that everyone wants to read are outside of bubbles. But that, right? I mean, we need to get past this thing and get to a place where everybody feels comfortable, because nobody feels like they're taking up space from where the space should be. And so for that, this first step has to happen.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I want to add that, as readers, those of you who are watching this, you are nodding your heads at everything everyone's saying. Support diverse authors by, if you can't buy their books, tell people about them, borrow them from, request your library to purchase them, and then read and review it. Like, there's so many ways you can support authors like us. And just help, because, in the end of the day, with traditional publishers, book sales matter. And that, those are big ways you can help without having to spend money if that's not in your budget.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder. If it is in your budget, you can also support the writers here today, again, and Astoria Books. So make sure you check that out. Okay, so with our kind of last couple of minutes here, thank you so much for your willingness to talk about all of these questions. I really appreciate it. And it was really nice for me to get to hear your opinions and your voices. Let's check out some of these questions. Okay, so first question is, what romance reads have you read recently and loved that you want everyone else to know about? Anyone else, or anyone want to start us off? Favorite books you've read recently? Thanks, Alexandria.
So I recently had the pleasure of reading A Certain Appeal by Vanessa King, which comes out, I believe, in November of this year, which is a fantastic Pride and Prejudice retelling set in the burlesque world of New York. And that was really fun. And then I also read Love at First Bite by Anna Collins, which comes out in January of 2022. And it is a fun Pacific Northwest set book where a woman builds a spite lighthouse to spite her ex. fiance. And that was a lot of fun. So I would definitely keep your eye out for both of those.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, Sonali.
Yeah, I was like, I had a complete senior moment there for a second. I read what? So I know I've read stuff recently. Priscilla Oliveras has a book coming out March next year, and I was lucky enough to read it. It is it's Romeo and Juliet, West Side. It's called West Side Love Story. It's a West Side Story retelling set in the world of mariachi bands, and there's a mariachi contest and two families that and gentrification. So it's music, gentrification, so warring families, and just these. I mean, it just, some books are just magic on the page, and these two were just magic on the page right from the beginning. They're just the kind of I like responsible. I like characters who want to do the right thing. Like, there's something about that I know that is not always popular, but I like kindness, and I like people who want to do the right thing, who care about their families, who carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. So it's just, they're these lovely characters, and I highly, highly recommend that. Speaking of Pride and Prejudice retellings, I just started The Bennet Women, which is Eden Apaya Kubi's debut, and the beginning, if the beginning is anything to go by, really fabulous too.
Yes. What was that, Priscilla? What was the title of that one?
West Side Love Story.
Oh, West Side Love Story. Okay. Sorry, I just have to write that down. That sounded amazing. Awesome. Anything else that we're reading that we highly recommend?
Well, I love anything that Kennedy Ryan writes. She's a beautiful writer. But her most recent book that I read was Queen Move, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, I read her writing like, man, I wish I could write like this, but that's not my style. And I will always sing the praises of Suleika Snyder's Big Bad Wolf. If you like angry, feminist, paranormal, security, special ops, like, this is for you. There's so much adventure. There's wolf shifter, and the heroine is just badass. And I think the second book in the series comes out soon, and that's on my TBR, so I highly recommend Big Bad Wolf.
Yeah, and Pretty Little Lion is the next one. Pretty Little Lion and Big Bad Wolf, and I completely second that. It's so dark and gritty and just badass. Loved it.
Fantastic. Anything else we're reading?
I just started reading Tiff Marcello's latest release, It Takes Heart. It's a heartwarming story that takes place in the Outer Banks, a second chance romance. So I'm in love with it. So yeah.
Awesome.
Two 2022 books that I've read recently that I really, really love, and I think should be on everybody's radar next year is Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. That book is so good. And also In the Event of Love by Courtney Kay. It's an FF Hallmark style romance, and it's very, very fun and very sweet, and I loved it.
I'm so jealous that you have read that one already. I love Courtney, and I cannot wait for that book. Yes, and Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon is fantastic. Just like such a wonderful book about living with depression. So I also second that one. Okay, I think we have time for maybe just like one more question. And it seems like a pretty specific question. So what book or idea or scene are you happy didn't get published? So do you have a book that you are happy will never see the light of day? Or was there a scene that got cut that in retrospect you were like, whew, thank goodness. I know. I mean, I'm happy that like every book I tried to write at the age of 16 will never be seen by another human being. So
do you mean like books that we've written in the past that we're glad?
I don't know. Yeah, it just says, what book or idea or scene are you happy didn't get published?
Everything I wrote before my debut. Because they were not ready. And I'm very happy they did not get published. They were not ready.
Yeah.
But you know, maybe there was one that maybe I'd like to bring back because I really did love it. But some of them are just like, no, it's good. They can stay, you know, in the trunk. That's fine.
Yeah.
There's a reason we don't like talking about them.
Yeah, I started with writing. So my books under the bed are my scripts that I worked on. And can I just say bad Bollywood? Like, no. I had one that I actually loved at the time, and I thought, oh, you know what? I should pull this out and kind of try and turn it into a romance novel. And it would have been less work to just write a completely new story because, a lot of everything over the top in Bollywood and everything over the top in like 80s romance, and those two things brought together. Not a proud moment.
I mean, I'm really curious still, but yeah, I understand that feeling, that personal wanting to hide it away. Anyone else?
Yeah.
So my very first book that I wrote, my first original book, I wrote it in 2014, and it was kind of at the height of new adult. And so I kind of like, I threw everything at it. So it was like a new adult dystopian royalty romance that like really spoke to my id. The main character, the hero in it was like a prince, but he was also a tattoo artist. And it will never see the light of day, but it made me very happy when I wrote it. And I feel like it was definitely foundational for figuring out, you know, the tropes that I like to write and kind of the relationship dynamics that I enjoy writing. But it was kind of a cluster. So yeah, I'm very glad that it will never see the light of day, but I do feel like it was necessary for me to write it to get to the point where I am now. So I cherish it for what it gave me, but I also am like, no.
Yes. Preslaysa, how about you?
I have a manuscript that's in my hard drive that I put in writing contests prior to being published. So I put them in the different writing chapter contests, and I would put in the first pages, and the first pages were really nice, and they would like final or first place or whatever. So then I'm like, oh, I'm finaling in all these contests. This book must be good, right? So then I like recently, like last year, I went to read the whole thing, and I'm like, this is horrible because there's no like real plot. Like, when is something gonna happen? Or they like the characters make a decision, but then like 3 scenes later, I don't know. It was just all over the place, a mess structure wise. So I'm glad that I did not pursue that or get that published. But the first chapter is like really good. So
I mean, that's important. I feel like, yeah, we all have that thing we had to write to get it out of our system, or like that thing we had to write to learn how to write things. And so I feel like that's a common experience. Well, I'm so sorry that we did not have time to get to all of the questions, but thank you so much for those of you who asked and put questions in the chat. Thank you so much, Astoria Bookshop, for having us here today. Carter, thank you so much for organizing this. I know the technology issue got tricky. I was definitely not supposed to be the leader person. So I'm sorry about that, but Carter, thank you so much for all the work that you put into this. Thank you, Sonali and Alyssa, for being willing to be flexible and do the switch. Please, if you have not already purchased these amazing books or read them, gotten them from your library, I highly recommend them. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Happy Bookstore Romance Day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Are we all trying to figure out how to get out?
Yeah, I don't know. Should I be exiting you out? I'm so sorry. I don't know how this system works. I can remove you if that is easiest. Do you want me to remove you? Yeah. Press end broadcast. That makes sense. That's on me. Okay, cool. All right. Now we're ending for realsies. I see it. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.